In a move that almost anyone could have predicted, Amazon has went ahead and told all their employees that they expect them to be in office 5 days a week starting 2025 January. And honestly, to most people, including the employees there, it's not that big of a surprise. I mean, last year they made everyone start coming in 3 days a week again, and it was pretty clear what was on their mind. And the whole 3 days a week was just a stepping stone to get there. But to a lot of people, including myself, the actual crazy part of all of this is the letter that Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, publicly released yesterday about the entire situation. While everyone else that picked up the story was pretty upfront with exactly what the news is about, you know, employees coming back to the office, this dude and his PR team somehow managed to put together one of the most convoluted messages and the most PR jam-packed things I've ever read. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, if you control F for culture, it shows up 12 different times in the article. I don't know what kind of PR team wrote this, but it is insane. Of course, he starts off by mentioning that he's making some changes to strengthen the culture and the teams at Amazon. And he starts it off with a bit of a personal story, a little anecdote about his life. When he started working at Amazon, he never thought that he would actually be here for 27 years. In fact, that wasn't his plan at all. He just wanted to work there for a couple years, get the bag, and move back to where he was from. Also, I love the fact that him and his PR team tried to be a bit quirky by adding in brackets, which my wife and I agreed to on a bar napkin in 1997. You know, like all those other entrepreneurs that come up with great ideas and life-changing innovations that they wrote on a bar napkin. This guy and his wife was writing down their financial plans on bar napkins and deciding whether or not he wanted to make bank at Amazon for 4 years or 2 years instead. Part of why I've stayed has been the unprecedented growth. We've had $15 million of annual revenue the year before I joined. This year will be north of $600 billion. So yeah, obviously I guess he stayed because he started making a lot more money than he thought he would. But the biggest reason I'm still here is our culture. Now look, my wife used to work at Amazon as a software engineer, so I've seen what this culture looks like firsthand, and I might be a bit biased here. But are we talking about the same culture here? The same culture that has your employees peeing in bottles because they don't have time to take breaks? The culture that makes your employees walk out and protest because they don't trust the actual leadership there? The culture that is almost commonly known across the world as one of the worst workplaces to work at? It's kind of wild that this is the hill that they chose to die on here with this big announcement of forcing people back in, that it's a culture decision. He even goes on to talk about how their culture is unique and has been one of the most critical parts of their success in the first 29 years. And I guess he's kind of right. I haven't heard of any other companies with the whole pee bottle situation, so they are unique in that sense. And if you thought him blatantly trying to gaslight everyone into thinking the culture was great at Amazon wasn't dystopian enough, he then goes on to say how he wants to operate Amazon like the world's largest startup. A quick Google search will show that they employ around 1.6 million people. What does it even mean to run a company of 1.6 million people as a startup? I feel like big companies talking about wanting to run their company like a startup is more commonplace nowadays in these fireside chats, these random emails that get sent to employees, and press releases than talking about becoming an AI first company at this point. Not to mention some startups are pretty shit to work at, so if you combine that with Amazon's current work-life balance, I feel like it just gets even worse. He even talks about the fact that it means having a strong urgency and that it's a race, which is absolutely insane, and fast decision making. The only thing this blog post from the CEO is missing is talking about layoffs. And oh yeah, I guess they do sort of mention that. You see, part of being a startup and making decisions quickly means that you have less overhead processes. That means no more unnecessary meetings, mechanisms, and layers that create overhead to waste valuable time. And that leads them to the conclusion that they're going to have to increase the ratio of individual contributors to managers by at least 15% by Q1 of 2025. Having fewer managers will remove layers and flatten organizations more than they are today. So surprise, I guess, to a bunch of managers that probably don't know it yet, you, I guess, are gonna get laid off. And look, I hate overhead, I hate processes and stuff like that, so I think this actually is sort of like a good move. If I was an engineer there, I would want to work with less overhead. But I mean, this is kind of like a wild way to announce layoffs without like officially announcing layoffs. Oh yeah, the PR team also realized they could double dip when it came to buzzwords and threw in bureaucracy as one of the main focuses of the blog. He even mentions that he created a bureaucracy mailbox for examples where we might see bureaucracy or unnecessary processes. So it's like this anonymous tip jar where you could be like, yeah, my manager's kind of a dick. He makes stand-up last 45 minutes instead of 15 minutes. So, you know, if we're talking about a ratio of 15% less, maybe he's one of the good candidates to go. But yeah, he's pretty much like, these things should be called out and extinguished, and I will read these emails and action them accordingly. The funny thing about this tip jar is that a lot of their employees don't even trust them in the first place. So I'd be sort of hesitant to snitch on my managers or people that were above me making my life harder, because God knows what they're going to do with that information. And then he goes on for the rest of this blog post to remind anyone who might not have been born before the pandemic that back in the olden days, you know, like I'm talking about 2019, people didn't actually work remotely or even hybrid for that matter. People had to go into the office every day, 5 days a week. And this really does feel like some kind of patronizing thing where it's like, oh, I know you guys got accustomed to working remotely and having better work-life balance, but you know, it wasn't always that way. So yeah, it sort of makes sense to revert back to the way things would be, but also we're focused on innovation and progressing the world and great culture that can only be fostered by working 8 hours a day in person. And I guess when you're on call, getting paid on your commute to and from work, you're also thinking about the business 24/7 because it's a race. He even goes so far as to say before the pandemic, it wasn't even a given that folks could work remotely 2 days a week, sort of attacking the current status quo of being hybrid and coming in 3 days and staying home for 2 days. We understand that some of our teammates may have set up their personal lives in such a way that returning to the office consistently 5 days per week will require some adjustments. To help ensure a smooth transition, we're going to make this new expectation active on January 2nd, 2025. Just think about that for a second. To ensure a smooth transition, we set a deadline. Like, what was the alternative? Demanding that everyone comes back today and that people should be grateful that they have this extra 3 to 4 months to prepare for this transition? Like, that's the big news. That's the big W you're handing out to people as part of your amazing, innovative culture. I love how in classic corporate speak, they don't ever explicitly mention what'll happen if you don't come back to the office 5 days a week, and just mention countless times that it is an expectation. And finally, he thanks the leaders and support teams, a lot of which might get laid off in the next couple of months, in advance for all the overtime they're gonna have to put in. He mentions again that having the right culture at Amazon is something he doesn't take for granted. He's an optimist and he believes these changes will really strengthen their culture. After reading this entire article, I can't decide what's more tone deaf: the fact that they're making changes at the company despite their employees literally walking out to try and stop them, or the fact that they constantly try to gaslight their employees by throwing the fact that their culture is a paragon of excellence into their face, meanwhile the whole world knows it's not. It's actually just fucking wild that people at the top and their PR team are so disconnected from the real world that they don't see how badly this comes across to people that read it. And yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting. I wanted to share it with you guys. I'll probably keep tabs on the situation, so if you want to see more, make sure you subscribe. Bye.